You're standing in a kitchen. Same kitchen where you ate Sunday dinners growing up. Same fluorescent light that flickers near the window. Same table through the doorway, same chairs, same arrangement. But the silence feels different now. Thicker, with something in it that nobody is naming. Your cousin made a comment about the car. Something casual, delivered sideways, the kind of thing that could have been admiration if you tilted your head a certain way, but didn't land like admiration. Your aunt said something about the neighborhood you moved to. Fancy, she said, with a smile that had something else behind it. Your mother smiled the way she does when she's waiting for something, though you're not sure what. You excused yourself to get a glass of water, and you've been standing in here for 4 minutes, not drinking it. You're in the house you grew up in, and you are a stranger in it. This is not a story about ingratitude. I want to be clear about that before we go any further, because the version of this story that most people tell misses the actual thing that's happening. The version most people tell is about success and the loneliness that supposedly comes with it. The high-class problem of having more while the people around you have less. That version is easier to explain. It's also wrong about the mechanism. This is something more specific. This is about what happens to the architecture of your relationships when the thing you represent changes. Not when you change, when what you represent changes. And those two things are not the same. You can remain exactly who you were and still become unrecognizable to people who knew you before. Because the category you occupied in their mental map is no longer the category you occupy. You're still the person who learned to drive in that driveway. Still the person who called them when things were bad. You carried everything alone. The years of discipline, the decisions that cost you socially, the Saturday mornings with spreadsheets instead of the things that felt easier. Nobody helped you. Nobody was watching. And that was fine. That was the deal you made with yourself. The deal didn't include this part. Subscribe. If you've been there, or if you can feel yourself moving toward there, subscribe. This is the conversation nobody knows how to start. 3 years ago, you had $200 in your checking account and $34,000 in credit card debt. Not because you were reckless. That's the assumption people make, and it's not accurate. The debt accumulated the way most debt accumulates, not in one dramatic decision, but across months of decisions that each made sense in isolation. The car you needed for work, the medical bill that wasn't optional, the months where the income stopped before the expenses did, and the credit card was the bridge between those two realities. $34,000. You were driving a 2009 Civic with a cracked windshield you kept meaning to fix. You hadn't fixed it because fixing it cost $280, and $280 had other places to be. Nobody called then to check in. Nobody had opinions about your neighborhood or your car or what you were doing with your life. You existed quietly, without comment, in a version of your life that generated exactly zero external scrutiny. The people who knew you were either in their own versions of that same situation or simply indifferent, which felt lonely at the time. What you didn't know is that the indifference was also a form of freedom. Think about it. When nothing significant is attached to your name, no expectation, no accumulated assumption about what you have access to, you move through your relationships as a person, just a person. That's rarer than it sounds. Most people don't notice it until it changes. Here's what nobody tells you about building from zero. The financial transformation is actually the part you can control. Hard, yes. Requiring years of uncomfortable decisions, yes, but controllable. You can model the numbers, you can track the account, you can make the choices. The missed vacations, the apartments you didn't upgrade when you could have. The quiet years when you were constructing something nobody around you could see yet. You can hold the line for 3 years and watch the debt go down and the savings go up and know exactly where you stand on any given Thursday. What you cannot model is what happens to the people around you while you're doing it. That part has no spreadsheet. It has no tracker. It announces itself only in retrospect, usually at a dinner table, usually holding a glass of water you haven't touched. The shift doesn't happen on the day the balance crosses some threshold. It happens gradually, over months, as what you represent begins to reorganize itself in the minds of the people who've known you longest. And it's not malicious. That's the hardest part to hold. It's not malicious. People aren't calculating. They're responding to new information about what you have, about what you might now be able to do, about what your presence means in the specific mathematics of their own situation. Now you have $5 million in assets, $2.1 million in a brokerage account, a paid-off property, a business generating $380,000 a year. Those numbers are on a screen somewhere. They don't look like what it cost to build them. They never do. The account doesn't know about the Saturday mornings, doesn't know about the windshield. What the account also doesn't show, the relationships that quietly restructured themselves around what those numbers represent, the way certain conversations started arriving preloaded with an agenda you didn't set, the way love began to show up packaged with expectation. Not always, not from everyone, but enough that you started being able to feel the difference. between the calls to talk and the calls to arrive at something, between presence and positioning, the rule. When you had $1,300, you were invisible to a specific kind of attention. That invisibility felt limiting at the time. You were struggling, nobody noticed, nobody cared. What you understand now, standing in this kitchen, is that the invisibility was also a form of protection. Nobody was looking at you as a resource. Nobody's problem had your name written next to it as a possible solution. You were a person in the room, not a buffer, not an answer to a question they were privately asking. Now you are the answer, whether you agreed to be or not. Before my first 100,000, I thought the hard part was the building. I thought that once the number moved, once it crossed some threshold that felt significant, the weight would finally lift. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known from inside the process, is that the weight doesn't lift. It relocates. It moves from the anxiety of not having enough to something harder to name, the awareness that what you've built has changed what you are to the people who were there before it. There's no one in your life who would understand what that screenshot means. The one you took when the debt hit zero, not all at once, but across 16 months of $180 here, $230 there, $310 when something aligned and you could push harder. Until one Thursday in February, you made the last transfer and the balance went to zero and you took a screenshot and didn't send it to anyone. The one you've never sent to anyone because there's no one to send it to who would understand what that particular zero represents. Not the absence of debt, but the presence of a 3-year decision. You are not a different person. You are a person whose coordinates have moved beyond the range of most maps. And the people who knew you at $200 still have the old map. So you're standing in the kitchen, 4 minutes, the glass of water is still full. The question you're actually asking, the one underneath the surface questions about the car and the neighborhood and your mother's smile, is whether the discomfort you're feeling right now was always going to be the price. Whether the decision you made years ago at a table over a spreadsheet at 11 on a Tuesday night already had this moment somewhere inside it. Whether the building contained from the beginning the cost of what gets built. I don't have a clean answer to that. I was going to try to give you one. I had something prepared about community and communication and the choices that interrupt the pattern. And maybe that's useful somewhere, but it would be the wrong kind of honesty right now. Some of this is just the cost of moving. The cost of going somewhere that the people you started with aren't going, or aren't going yet, or maybe won't ever go. The cost is real, and it's specific, and it doesn't appear in any financial model. The models measure the money. They don't measure what happens to you at a dinner table in the house you grew up in, holding a glass of water you haven't touched, trying to remember which version of yourself you're supposed to be in this room. What I can tell you is this. The version of this story that ends in resentment, theirs toward you or yours toward the distance, is not the only version available, but it is the default. The version that runs if nobody makes a different choice. The default version is the one where the distance grows and nobody names it and the dinners get more formal, and eventually you become a story they tell about someone who used to sit at the table. A story about the person who left. The machine doesn't ask if you're ready. It runs. The capital compounds. The decisions compound. The distance compounds. You're in the kitchen. The glass is full. The silence has something in it nobody is naming. That part, the naming of it, is still up to you. The account can't do that part. The account only keeps score.